Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting of the Frederick County School Board to order. It is August 26th, Wednesday. Time is 4:32. And it looks like we have an agenda before us. How would the committee like to proceed?
Madam Chairperson, I would like to make a motion to approve the agenda before us.
Second.
All right, we have a motion. It's been properly seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. And it looks like we have some new business, and I will turn that over, Dr. Hummer, to your team for a few presentations.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman. We have a couple items before you this evening. A couple of these listed there at the bottom. We are recommending to be moved to the full board for action. Item 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, and 11. The other items are for information only. So the first is we're just going to provide you some information about the new FY25 budget document, which you all were provided copies. We also have copies on our website. So if you have any questions about that, please let us know. We also had another information item about staff percentages and costs. We were getting a lot of questions about the breakdown of our staff and their salaries, so we want to be able to answer any questions about that. So we're able to put that information together for you. The first item that's going to be asked that you all move to the full board for approval is contracted services and approving 12 full-time equivalents, which we will talk about here in a second. We also have our NREP lease agreement, which is your property, so you all need to approve that as well. We also have a contract award for agency nursing and special education student services, and that's contracted services for specific services for students. That is also an item that will need to go to the full board for approval. I promise, Madam Chair, I'm almost done. I know there's a lot of items on here. We also have 2 information items for our FY24 athletic reports, as well as our year-end financial statements. And of course, please ask all questions as we go through that. And then 8, 9, and 11 are also going to be requested that goes to the full board for approval, which is the carry forward of restricted, unrestricted, as well as a George Mason FCPS partnership lab school at Dow J, which we're very excited about. We just need your approval for that. And then one item that is not up for approval to go to the full board, just for information, is there's some opioid funds that the county had inherited through a lawsuit, and they are asking us if we could utilize those dollars. So we're still working through that. So we have some information to share with you, and then once we get some more information from the county, we will provide that to you. So, Mr. Bell, looks like you have a question.
I do. Actually, it's not a question. It's a point. Actually, on the agenda, we only have 10 items, and on the screen, we have 11.
Dr. Hummer, that's because we separated out restricted and unrestricted on this because they're 2 different actions. So if you look at that number 10, I think probably on the agenda, it probably says...
So number 8, see where it says restricted and unrestricted?
Yeah.
So we just broke it out on the agenda here.
That's fine. I just want to make sure that everyone at home understands
Yes,
that,
sir.
and
Yes.
we fix it.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Bell. So with that, we'll now hand it off to... All right, Ms. Anderson, go right ahead. Thank you.
All right. So as Dr. Hummer said, the FY25 budget document is available on our website. There's 2 versions that are available. Our typical version, which is in a published format, also has an addendum to it that has every account code detailed and the expense amount. With it is also an account legend so that you know exactly what each segment of our account, what it means.
Thank you
Okay.
for including that. That was one of my biggest asks when I first took the seat in January, so thank you all for doing that work. Very much
Certainly.
appreciate it.
And something that's new this year is we have a user interactive version that I'm going to quickly show you. So if you can see here in the toolbar, our document is organized in 4 major sections. The executive summary is exactly what it is. It is a liftable summary of everything else that's in the document. The organizational section, you'll see, focuses on how we're governed, the regulations that we follow, as well as our planning process, short and long-term goals, and our financial regulations and best practices that we follow. The financial section is where it gets to be user interactive. So if you go down to the school board fund, graphs such as these, you can choose how you want to see the data all throughout this section. So all of our funds, sources and uses are there. And then we have the informational section that has detail about our student enrollment, historical data, current data, and 3 years of forecasted trends, as well as our staffing positions and our performance indicators and how we benchmark with regional school divisions. And a table of our outstanding debt is also found there. So it's a plethora of information. We produce this budget document annually for two main reasons. It's intentional. One, we want to provide transparency to our stakeholders. And two, it holds us accountable to ensure that we stay current with best financial and budgetary practices. Okay?
That is very slick. I like it a lot. Thank you.
Show off.
So if there are no questions there, we'll move on to the next topic, which is for information. Staff positions and salaries by our pay groups. So here you see our various pay groups. We've broken apart the administrator pay group between what's school-based and non-school-based. The school-based administrators are principals and assistant principals. Non-school-based are superintendents, directors, and assistant directors that are housed here, as well as the transportation and facilities departments. Other professionals, similar to the administrators, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, these professionals are not eligible for overtime pay. And you can see at the bottom of the slide the type of jobs that make up the other professionals. These are our supervisors, our coordinators, IT engineers, school nurses. And then, of course, teachers is our largest pay group. In this group are classroom teachers, as well as our counselors and librarians. And the last pay group, these are classified hourly. They are eligible for overtime pay, and they include our bus drivers, our administrative assistants, instructional assistants, custodians. What's not included here are our school nutrition workers because they're managed in a separate fund.
I think it's interesting. So 6.9%, so 4.5% plus 2.4%, 6.9% of the entire workforce within FCPS are administrators.
That is correct.
Not too bad for a third of $1 billion business. That seems right on par. So thank you.
Good. If there are no other questions, we'll move on to the next slide. Good. All right. So here's our first slide where we are requesting a motion. We currently contract the services that you see here in this table through third-party vendors. And what we're requesting is an addition of 12 full-time equivalent positions so that we can direct hire employees providing these services to our students.
So just to foot stomp this one a little, so just to make sure it's clear to everyone, so we are not, it says creating 12 new full-time equivalents, create 12 full-time equivalents. Those new equivalents will take place of services already provided to our students through contractors. Contractors are much more expensive for a multitude of reasons, mostly because they can. They're in high demand and they can charge a premium. You also have to pay for their travel and you also have to pay for all their incidentals. Once we bring them under our own house here in FCPS, it's significantly cheaper. So this is a money savings.
That is correct.
Excellent. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a
Yes.
question. The numbers that you have presented here for the full-time equivalent, are they static numbers? In other words, are we only looking for one occupational therapist, one physical therapist, and so forth? Or is there an opportunity to expand on instructional and speech assistants or behavior assistants if needs be?
So, Mr. Bell, Madam Chair, if I can expand on this. Great question. So essentially, we've created a practice that we need to fix. So yes, we have these current positions on here because these are the current positions that we don't currently have FTEs for. Right. However, we are paying for these positions. Right. So if tomorrow, if Mrs. McDonald comes to us and says, we need another vision teacher because we have students who transferred in, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to find that position. We're not just going to take money that Mrs. Camry finds and just pay this individual. We need to find an FTE to fill that position. And then if we can't find that position, we need to come to you to approve an FTE.
Yep.
Whereas before, we just took those dollars to pay these individuals. And then as Madam Chair mentioned, we have individuals that come, and because this place is so amazing, they're like, well, we love it here. We want to be actually part of your team. And we're like, sorry, we don't have an FTE for you. And it's making a lot of people frustrating. And back to what Madam Chair said, it's going to save us money in the long run.
Oh, for sure.
Right? So these are just the current positions that we have. We want to create FTEs for, but in the future, we are going to fix that practice where we don't have to come to you with this large number of asks.
Got it.
Does that help?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
So we're looking for a motion for, to move this to the full school board for approval of the FTEs.
We don't do that.
Do you want to do it
Well,
now? or you
so,
wanna do it at the
so
end?
Madam Chair, it's up to you about how
Okay.
you want to do that. Again, either way, I would recommend to do it now since we have so many.
Let's
so we
just
don't
knock
have
it
to
out.
keep Going back and knock it out, that would
Yeah.
be my recommendation.
Sounds good. All right, well, so we have a recommendation to forward to the full board a request to create 12 FTE equivalents representing positions and contracted services.
Madam Chair, I move that we make a motion to move the proposal for the full board to request create 12 new full-time equivalent representing positions and contracted services.
I second that.
We have a motion, it's been properly seconded. Any discussion? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Right, so we'll move on to our next topic. So we are seeking school board approval of a lease agreement between Frederick County Schools and the NREP program. As you know, the NREP program is shared between Frederick, Winchester City, and Clark County Public Schools. Frederick students make up about 71% of the program. So this is a lease agreement for the Cincinnati Road property. As you can see on the slide, the terms of the lease, it's a one-year lease that automatically renews for 5 additional one-year terms unless otherwise terminated. Either party may terminate the lease given 180 days advance written notice. NREP pays Frederick County Schools annual rent of $377,214, and we receive that in 12 equal installments. NREP pays the utilities of the facility. The building and its contents are properly insured, and the lease agreement is written that NREP cannot alter the building in any way without our approval or input. So if there are no questions, we're looking for a motion here as well.
So just to clarify, this is revenue for us. We are making money off of this. Bringing money in, let me rephrase.
We're bringing money
We are
into the
bringing
school
money in.
operating fund, yes.
Okay, into the school operating fund. Excellent, thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a question. So are we subletting this building, or yes, are we subletting this building? Does Northwestern Regional own it, or do they lease it from the city of Winchester?
We own this building.
We
Frederick County
own the
Schools.
building,
Yeah, that's why we're getting the,
and we're,
Yeah, Cincinnati Road is in Frederick County.
oh, it is, okay, I apologize, that's, all right, then what is the motion?
so this is paid to us.
Yes, now I understand, thank you.
Paid to FCPS.
Sorry.
No problem.
It's a long day in the civics land.
No problem. So we do have a recommendation.
Madam Chair, I move the committee forward to the full board the proposed lease between Frederick County Public Schools and the Northwestern Regional Education Programs for consideration with the recommendation for approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion. It's been properly seconded. Any discussion? No? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
So at this time, we're also looking for a motion to move to the full board the contract award for agency, agency nursing and special education student services. The award amount is an estimated $2 million annually, and the awarded vendor would be the Stepping Stones Group LLC.
And just to add some clarifying points to this, I did ask this question earlier while in my prep meeting. The Stepping Stones Group is a group of it's a group of people, it's an organization, a business that provides contracted services to our students, whether it's behavioral specialists, continuing education for teachers. They basically fill in the holes where we can't staff. So we can't get enough staff to fill these positions that we need to accommodate our students. And these accommodations, Dr. Hummer, are required by law, state and federal both, in order we need to serve this student group. So we do not have in our budget the FTEs, nor do we have the recruitment availability to, we cannot recruit people in time. So hence if you saw, we started the year off with 77 teacher vacancies, and as a plethora of other vacancies, we are having issues filling these positions full-time. How did I do with that? Is that correct?
You're spot on.
Okay, I kind of fumbled my way through it. I want to make sure that that's as clear as mud. So in other words, we need to fill these positions, and this is a group that we are hiring to do so.
Correct.
With the goal that potentially next year, we might be able to do the same as we just showed you on a few slides back of bringing these positions in-house as FTEs and saving money. But right now, we can't.
That's correct.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I have one clarifying question. I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding. So these are similar to our nursing positions we already have in-house and our other sped services that we already have in-house, but these are supplemental. Is that correct?
So these are typically used for behavior technicians, speech language pathologists, occupational therapy, physical therapy services.
So into that same category, the list that we saw in the previous motion for the 12 FTEs, those types of positions.
Similar positions, yes. Yep.
And if I can answer, because I want to answer the question that you asked as well, is this is in addition because these are nurses specific for students.
So they're assigned to students.
Correct, correct.
Okay.
That helps.
Yep.
That does clarify it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So we are looking for a motion to forward this to the full board.
Madam Chair, I move the committee forward to the full board the contract award for the Stepping Stones Group LLC for agency nursing and special education student services in the amount of $2 million.
$2 million. I second it.
We have a motion that's been properly seconded. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And any opposed? All right, motion passes.
Okay, so next up is our athletic reports. The athletic reports are posted on the FCPS website under the financial reports and audit section. In total, Frederick County Public Schools had 2,294 students participate in our athletic programs. If a student participated in 2 sports, they were counted twice, and there is a $75 participation fee for high school sports. 1,477 students from high schools and 817 from middle schools, and this number also includes the athletes and the team managers. Total expenditures for high school and middle schools was $2,600,825.88. $1,464,120.29 of that total was paid out of school board funds, and $1,136,705.59 was paid out of student activity funds. On this slide is the FY24 athletic reports for high schools. $979,548.19 was spent using student activity funds. These purchases include uniforms, equipment, event registration fees, and the payment of officials for athletic events. $1,320,605.42 was spent using school board funds. These funds were used for the salaries of the coaching staff, athletic trainers, athletic directors, and the transportation of students to and from athletic events. On the next slide is the FY24 athletic reports for the middle schools. $157,157.40 was spent using student activity funds. These purchases also included uniforms, equipment, event registration fees, and the payment of officials for athletic events. $143,514.87 was spent using school board funds. These funds were used to pay the salaries of the coaching staff, the athletic directors, as well as transportation for students to and from athletic events. Any questions about the athletic reports?
Madam Chair, I have a question about the officials line. I noticed that that's one of the largest expenditures, and I'm curious from previous conversations whether we're still seeing a spike or an increase in the cost of bringing in officials, both at the middle and the high school, to officiate games. I know that's been a cause of concern in the past.
I do have factual information on that, if I may. I have a very close friend and colleague who's actually a ref in the area, and what he has mentioned to me is that they had to move games to Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays because there is a shortage of finding referees. And I know this is across the Commonwealth as well. I know that we actually have been asked to have some games on Thursdays as well because there is a shortage. I don't know if that necessarily equates to a higher fee. We would have to look into that. I'm not sure of that, but I do know that there has been a shortage and they've had to adjust their schedule accordingly. It's just people are not going into that profession for whatever reason. There was actually an article in a newspaper. I don't know if it was locally or across the Commonwealth because I pay attention to what's going across the state. And they said that there's just a lack of people going in for time reasons. And the amount, like we see that as $10,000, but we got to remember that's for a whole season. So these individuals are doing it just for the love of the game and not necessarily to make a living. So I think that was part of another reason that they're looking at and adjusting in regards to what that looks like. So we can determine if they're charging us extra. That I don't know. And hopefully that answers your question.
It does. I just wanted to make sure that you guys are getting the support that you need there because I know that that's something that, like you said, a lot of our peers are facing that same difficulty.
Yeah.
I have a question, Madam Chair, if I may. For the officials, do these numbers include teachers that also work as officials for some of these games? Like when I worked at Ayler, for the football team, I did the lines. For the volleyball team, I also did the lines. And I'm just wondering if that's inclusive because I think we were given some sort of stipend for it.
It is, but it is not included in these numbers.
It's not.
It is not.
And I'm wondering if the cost of the officials could be brought down and the lack of participation in this field could be uplifted if we incorporated more teachers into this program.
So what I do know is that in order to make a game official, you need to have an official. So we couldn't have teachers officiating these games and they be counted as an official game. They can definitely help out with, like you're suggesting,
I see.
lines. And for example, I was at a volleyball game last night, Go Sharando, and they have the individuals on the side, and I apologize, I don't know the name of them, but they're the flag individuals, and
That's
there
the
are
line
staff
judge.
members.
That's what I did.
So they hold the flag up if it's in, they hold it up if it's out, and we pay them. But again, there are officials that they use to make that game official. So
And that has to go through like the high school.
BHSL and yeah. So we have to be careful there.
I see.
Now, could we encourage our teachers to go through and maybe become officials? Sure, but I would just be careful because of all of the burden that's on them, and a lot of times it's individuals that have retired or something like that. That's typically what we've seen.
Well, I will say that every time I officiated, Ayler always won. So I'll just leave that out there for you.
And I'll also just add on to this, too. Having officials be official, and Dr. Hummer, you mentioned they have to be approved by VHSL. So it's my understanding Blue Ridge United and some of the other private entities that provide private sports in the region also have to have officials.
Right.
And officials with that official licensure or accreditation to officiate a game. So this is not something that is public school only. This would apply to any private entity as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to the FY24 year-end financial statements. The financial reports are posted in board docs, but if you would like a hard copy of them, just let one of us know and we can get that to you. The following slides provide a summary of information for each of the funds as of June 30th, 2024. The detailed information can be found in the financial reports, and there are page numbers on the slides that correspond with the report. And we are going to pause after every fund, just in case you have a question. So we're going to start with NREP, and Kristen stole my thunder and said a lot of my notes, so she stole my notes this morning, that Frederick County Public Schools is the fiscal agent for NREP, and it's a partnership between Winchester City, Frederick, and Clark County, where we serve students with high-intensity special needs. There are about 200 students, with 71% being FCPS students. The main source of funds come from the FCPS operating fund, and the remaining come from the other school divisions in the state. 83% of the funds are used for instruction, and the rest are used for operations, maintenance, and administration. The ending operating fund balance of $347,710 is carried forward into the next year and will be a credit to the participating localities. The NREP textbook fund balance of $26,678 will remain until new textbook adoptions are required.
Madam Chair, I have a question with regards to the operations and maintenance of the facility at NREP. I know it's an older school, and I'm wondering if at some point we could see a comparison of the percentage of the funds that are used for the upkeep of this facility versus other facilities that we have of similar nature. I know this was a former elementary school, so maybe comparing it to some of our other elementary schools. I would like to see that if that's possible. Thank you.
All right, the private purpose funds include a private purpose endowment and private purpose income fund that the school division maintains. The endowment fund includes contributions and management fees and has an ending balance of $238,326. The income fund includes restricted donations, interest, and restricted expenses. It is comprised of the Armstrong Foundation Scholarship, the Della Stein Scholarship, Clyde and Alfreda M. Logan Scholarship, Bright Futures Program, FCPS 101, and preschool donations. The ending balance of the income fund is $676,027. The private purpose fund balances are brought forward each year into the next fiscal year.
I would just like to add a little anecdotal, a little editorial, I should say here. For FPS 101, that 1528 is through a donation, so that does not cost the FCPS any money, any amount, so no tax dollars go towards FCPS 101. The preschool donations also are purely indeed donations. That is another thing that does not come out of taxpayer funds. That preschool donation came from a dissolved 501c3 that had leftover funds, and then they decided to donate it for that endeavor should we choose to expand our preschools.
And the Consolidated Services Fund are our bus and vehicle services that are provided by FCPS and billed to users. The services are made up of repairs as well as parts and fuel that are sold to customers through billings. You can see on the pie chart that 82% of the billings are billed to FCPS and the remaining go to other agencies. The ending balance of $951,535 includes inventory, which consists of fuel and parts, as well as outstanding purchasing commitments. The Health Insurance Fund is medical and dental premiums that are collected from FCPS and participating employees and used to pay the insurance claims. Premiums are based on a range of expected claims. The pie chart shows the percentages of the sources of funds and how they are used. We have 1,930 employees plus their dependents that are covered by our plan. The expenditures were more than the revenues by $427,764, which leaves a fund balance of $9.1 million. This equates to about 4 months of expected claims. And in FY24, our partnership with the care team was ended, but we now have a new partnership with Valley Health that has started for our clinic.
The School Capital Project Fund is for the purchase of capital items not provided for in the annual school operating fund, and project scopes are too small for the school construction fund. This fund typically receives revenue from the local governing body through direct appropriation or the transfer of funds from the prior year's school operating fund remaining balances. FCPS used the beginning fund balance of $3,310,246 and a transfer of $877,282 in prior year school operating surplus funds reappropriated by the county to purchase the items and projects in the financial statements related to school facilities. Projects started in FY23 and completed by June 30, 2024 were the Sharando High School heat pump replacement, Millbrook High School roof replacement, and the Transportation Center building HVAC replacements. Projects started in FY24 and completed or in progress as of June 30, 2024 were the Dow J. Howard fire alarm replacement, the Apple Pie Ridge Elementary School fire alarm replacement, the Armel Elementary School fire alarm replacement, Stonewall Elementary School fire alarm replacement, and the Facility Services West fire alarm installation.
Could we go back to that one just ever for a few minutes? I just want to clarify. The most confusing bullet on here for me was the revenue line. So the revenue line that says $877,282, that was reappropriated and given back to FCPS by the Board of Supervisors. They did not have to give that money back. So we came in under budget last year. This money, we said, hey, we're giving it back because that's what we're required by Virginia State Code to do to the Board of Supervisors, who is our appropriating entity. We gave it back and we asked it in return so that we could work on some of the capital projects that we need, which is building maintenance and all the other items that Ms. Chapman was kind enough to read off. They are not required to give that money back to us. They could keep it. Now, when they keep it, it goes to their contingency fund. We don't know what they do with that money. So we were able to get that back and apply it to things that we needed fixed here at FCPS. Thank you. Anybody, any other?
Okay. Next is the construction fund. The active construction projects for FY24 were the Indian Hollow Elementary School and James Wood High School renovation projects. A life-to-date summary is shown on the slide and is provided in a different format in the financial statement. The amounts shown in bold represent active project balances at year end, which will automatically be reappropriated in the next fiscal year to continue the project.
Can I add a little to this one as well? The fourth high school, you see a budget of $6 million, expenses by June 30th, 2024 that were encumbered, basically spent, of $5,376,282, with $623,718 remaining, and that is dedicated funds for the fourth high school. That initial $6,000 came when we initially acquired the land, and then also did the architectural study back in 2012, 2013-ish.
6 million.
6 million. What did I
said
say?
6,000.
I missed a few zeros. 6 million. That's
Wanna
important.
clarify.
That's important. Thank you. That initial 6 million that you see there was given to us, was appropriated to us from the Board of Supervisors at that time to acquire the land, to do the initial architectural designs. We spent $5,376,282 of that, and then it was halted. So we have a surplus of $623,718 just sitting there. So, just to clarify.
And then that leads me to the next question of what, I assume that 623,718 is earmarked specifically for the fourth high school, and can it be moved or can it not be?
Yes, so we could go down to the county to ask them to move both of those lines for Armel and for the fourth high school to be utilized to another project
I
or
see.
towards the fourth high school if they approve it. We would have to ask them to move that money.
I see. And would that also follow with the other two, James Wood and Indian Hollow?
If we don't spend that money by the end of those two projects, yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. But I see the encumbrances are not for the, we're not, there are no encumbrances with a fourth high school or Armel at this time.
At this time, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
got it. Thank you.
So in the spirit of school construction, the school debt service fund is how we finance those major school construction projects. The school debt service fund is a $19 million fund that pays the principal and interest on general obligation bonds that are sold through the Virginia Public School Authority to finance those major construction projects. When we have appropriation and approval for major construction projects, we have access to the bond market 2 times a year. one in the spring, one in the fall. So this fund is used to pay back the principal and interest on bond issues. We're currently paying on 35 bond issues. Each bond issue is amortized or paid back over a 20-year period. Those 35 bond issues span 14 different construction projects in the past 20 years, which is an indicator of our growing community and our community's commitment to good schools. The county general fund is the major funding source to pay back or to service our debt. And you can see on the slide that when we began last fiscal year, our outstanding debt was $158.6 million. We incurred new debt during the year for James Wood High School. And then we paid almost $13 million back in principal, leaving an outstanding debt of $170.2 million at June 30th. Now, going forward, we just recently applied for the final bond for the James Wood High School project. We applied for $3.2 million. And if the CIP is not funded, we won't incur any debt past that. Okay. So next we'll move to a special revenue fund, which is our school textbook fund. State standards of quality funding, as well as a local required matching funds, supports the purchases of textbooks for our students. The local match comes from a transfer from our school operating fund into this fund. We use those funds to support a half-time administrative assistant to manage the textbook inventory. Our textbooks can be in both hard copy and digital formats. And during the fiscal year 2024, we adopted AP Environmental Science textbooks. So we ended the year with a fund balance of just over $3.1 million. That fund balance is committed and rolls forward to the next year to support future textbook adoptions. So we have a special grants fund right now that contains the funds that we received from the state for the All in Virginia initiative. We received $4,163,705 for this initiative. 70% is encouraged to go towards high-intensive tutoring, 20% to implementing the Virginia Literacy Act, and 10% for combating chronic absenteeism. This was a response from the COVID years to try to improve student achievement. So we finished the year with $2.9 million of that funds remaining. So those monies roll forward to this year. We have until June 30th, 2026 to fully spend these funds on these initiatives.
Ms. Anderson, if I can add a little as well, just so that for everyone here in the gallery as well as watching online, the state All in Virginia revenues and the Virginia Literacy Act, those came from Governor Youngkin's initiatives to help us all recover from COVID. So that's where these funds were appropriated from Governor Youngkin's administration, and we have, as you did say, until June 30th of 2026. And should we not use all these funds, which it looks like we've been pretty fiscally prudent with them thus far, they will go back to the state. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So this takes us to the School Nutrition Fund. Our school nutrition operation is a $12 million enterprise. We have 20-some cafeterias. So 56% of our students participated in the lunch program every day, and 27% of our students got breakfast every morning with us. So during the year, we operated under the National School Lunch Program. What that means is for families who financially can or are financially able, we charge them a price for breakfast and lunch should they participate, with the exception of 9 schools that were served under the community eligibility provision. Under that provision, because of the economics, those schools were provided meals that were reimbursed by the federal government. The school operating fund also subsidized this fund to pay off unpaid meal balances of $171,000. the school operating funds subsidize that because by law, we cannot use school nutrition funds to pay those unpaid student balances. Okay? So you can see on the chart that the federal government is the major revenue source for this fund. The uses of funds, the fund supports 96 and a half full-time equivalent positions to operate our school nutrition program. So personnel and food are the greatest expense. We ended the year with expenditures being more than revenues. We expected that. And it resulted in an ending fund balance of almost $3.9 million. Of that $3.9 million, there's a value that is tied to inventory, so that's not spendable, as well as we had an outstanding purchasing commitment to complete the cafeteria renovation at Jameswood Middle School. So the residual fund balance of $3.2 million is the equivalent of an average 4 months of operating expense for the program. Best practice is 3 months. So we have a healthy fund balance, and the state is going to encourage us to come up with a spend-down plan to get to that 3-month best practice mark.
Just to expound on that, 3 months of best practice. So in any business, you want to have you want money left over. So this is not anything, shouldn't be anything new to business owners out there, because zero-based budgeting does not work in this instance. And we are also driven by Virginia State Code to have that surplus as well. Is that correct? It's not just a best practice.
It is a best practice.
It's just a best practice. Okay, because you did mention the spend down, so I might be a little confusing. So
Agreed.
so would it be fair to say that the state, because it is a best practice, will encourage us to have a spend down program so that we're using our funds correctly? Is that kind of the gist behind why?
That is
Okay.
correct, yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
One follow-up question. And pardon the novice question, but the $171,000 for unpaid meal balances, what composes that? Is that literally just meals not paid for, things like charge accounts that don't end up getting paid?
It's exactly that for our students.
Is that typical? Is that number typical?
It's growing. It was 150 some last year.
Okay. Obviously, you don't have to answer this right now, but is that something that we need to have a broader conversation about? That's a great deal of money, especially if we're trying to close a gap. I'm just wondering what options are available to us with respect to how to come up with almost $200,000 of unpaid meal balances.
Madam Chair, if I may, I think another piece that we are going to want to talk about again for this upcoming budget cycle, and I respect where the board stands on the initial proposal, but it is, I think, I would be remiss not to mention it, is that all of our schools qualify for CEP. So last year, the federal government changed that percentage from 40% to 25% to qualify, and as a county, we qualify. So those 9 schools, all 21 do qualify for those services. But because of the amount of reimbursement dollars that we receive from the federal government, it wouldn't maintain that balance, and we would have to put more operating dollars into that balance. And we had a long conversation. We had healthy conversations about this, and we went back and forth on this. But at the end of the day, the dollars that would need to go into the operating budget was significantly more than $171,000. So one of the things that we are going to have to talk through, to your point, is do we just want to continue to increase that unpaid meal balance, or do we want to then reconsider adding more schools? I know at the end of our budget cycle last year, we talked about maybe phasing in some more schools so it's more palatable for us to continue to work up to that. The other piece, too, which we're waiting to hear back from the state, is they have a work group that they're putting together. And I know Mr. Bell was asking about that as well, and we have not heard any information back on that yet, because I think they're still working through that work group. Is
Their
that
findings
correct?
are supposed to be reported by November 5th.
November, you are correct.
And that work group stemmed from Senate Bill 283.
Correct. Yep.
Because essentially what they're researching is Virginia as a whole, from what my understanding, I'll just ad lib here a bit, they're trying to determine as a whole, is Virginia in need of this, or are we getting richer? Because the original CEP, when I was doing my initial research into what exactly it was and how it came to fruition, the original intent behind CEP was to help communities that were becoming less socioeconomically advantaged. So they were becoming more economically disadvantaged. Here in Frederick County, according to the initial revenue numbers that I've received, that aren't quite official, but approximate from several board of supervisors, is we're becoming richer as a county. So it's going to be interesting to look at the math, because this is indeed $28 more than what was in our budget last year. So if we're getting richer, why is this balance going up?
Right.
So
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I think the other piece too, because there was a lot of learning experience going through that conversation, and I think one of the biggest misnomers that was out there that we were able to talk through is, of these 9 schools, they're not making meals for all the students that are in those 9 schools. Our nutrition workers do a fantastic job to determine how many breakfasts they need to make, how many lunches they need to make, and at the end of the day, they're not throwing out all of these meals. And we do have an honest population where if they can afford to bring a lunch in or pay for lunch, that those families were doing that. But we do have families that were taking advantage of that too, as they should, because if it's free lunch in these 9 schools, then they're able to do that. Because it is a nutritious meal. So there's a lot of back and forth in that conversation that we've had. We'll just have to take that into consideration, and where the board wants to land on that, we're more than happy to provide that information.
Mr.
Excellent.
Goodwin just shared with me that as of yesterday, our unpaid meal balances were up to 13,000, and school started on August 14th.
Just this year.
okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying for this year, it's up to 13,000?
That's
And how many
correct.
days have we been in school?
Since
little over
August
2
14th,
weeks.
yeah.
So 10 days, $13,000, over $1,000 a day.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And the school nutrition department does send out notifications to families about the unpaid balances.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
So, Madam Chair, Mr. Erskine, you go right ahead.
I was just going to ask if there was a mechanism for recovering those dollars.
Yeah, please, Mr. Goodwin, thank you.
I'm happy to speak to that. We are required and have as a practice sent notice home to each one of those families that receives the debt notice. So yeah, as families come through, they are fed and they are served, and each one of those families will receive a notice that they do owe that money. So they are asked to pay it back, but we don't get all that money back. I think last year we ended with the number that you've already described. So that's the mechanism to get it back. But I'm not aware of another unless someone else has that.
If I may, really quick, Mr. Bell, if that's all right. So I think one of the things, to your point and to Mrs. Klein's point, Madam Chair, is we just need to make sure that we don't lose sight of what this is. And that was one of the things that we talked about in the beginning, that nobody on this board, nor myself, ever wants to come across that we don't want to feed students. Right, and that is number one. And you all were very clear on that if you weren't going to approve the additional schools, that we want to make sure that they do get fed, and that was very loud and clear, and we want to make sure the community knows that as well. But this is more than just feeding students a meal. It's feeding them a nutritious meal, and feeding them a meal that they might not have access to, of having that main course meal and having a vegetable and a fruit and all of those pieces. So and also portion sizes, making sure that our students are having the right portion sizes. And we do have students that come to school and don't eat breakfast when they leave home. Families might afford it, but as we've all been there, they're very busy, they're not able to get the breakfast, or for whatever reason. And for us to be able to feed our students in the morning and the afternoon, and there is a lot of research out there that when you have students that are fed and they do have that morning breakfast and they do have that lunch, that they are going to be more attentive. And as we can see, we do have students that might not meet that cutoff, but for whatever reason they're not eating. We just want to make sure we keep that at the forefront of our conversation. We get the taxpayer dollar, we get the balance of adding more money to operation versus the $171,000 or whatever that is. So I think we just need to come up with what that compromise is, so that we are giving our students access to meals, and we are also being good stewards of our dollar. And I think that is why the state has definitely jumped in on this and taking the lead on it, because they are familiar with the same research that we are, in that we want to make sure that our students are fed so that they can access their education. So a lot more to come on that. Hopefully with this next budget cycle too, we'll have more information coming out from the state, because if they're able to give us some additional money on this, or even an LCI match, it's going to help us out. So we're not going to the Board of Supervisors for $2 million. Maybe it's only $400,000 or whatever that match would be, is what we're hoping would happen.
And just a little more information about Senate Bill
Please.
283. I've been following this one kind of closely. So Senate Bill 283. So it went to after the both houses passed the budget and went to Governor Youngkin. So this was actually Governor Youngkin's request. It's my understanding to have this work group put together to, and I don't know who is on the work group, what it's comprised of, but to have this work group put together to come up with these findings and give us more data, which I think will be very useful by November 5th.
Yes. Madam Chair, if I may. Three things. First, I believe if you look up Senate Bill 283, you'll find that the House and the Senate both approved this unanimously. And second, I'm wondering, do we, and I don't remember from when I was at Eller if anything has changed, do we offer a second chance breakfast to our students? The reason I ask, at the school I teach in Clark County, during second period, we roll out carts to the different hallways and allow students to purchase a breakfast if for some reason they arrived late to school, or if their buses were late or they didn't have time to eat breakfast in the morning. That's you, Shane. You can't
I was
pass
waiting
the
for
buck
Patty.
on this
I was
one.
waiting for Patty to give me the mic. So we do offer that. That's true. Yes,
You do.
So they do have an opportunity, and when they arrive, yes, we take care of them. There's the opportunity there. We'd like to expand that. That would be an opportunity through the CEP program if we were to move in that way. It's much easier to have a second chance breakfast when everybody's eligible.
Sure, of
But
course.
yeah, that's right. So yes, food is available when students arrive if they take advantage of it. Yes.
Thank you. And
Yes,
then
sir.
thirdly, I'm sorry, Shane, my daughter I owe $2.30 some cents.
I'll be here after the meeting.
All right. You take an out-of-state check?
From you, I would.
All right.
Yes.
Sorry.
Ready to move on? Okay. So let's move to our largest fund, the fund that accounts for our day-to-day operations of the school division, the school operating fund. So during the FY24, we took in $227.2 million. And you can see from the pie that both the state and the county equally provided 47% of those funds. The remaining 6% is highly restricted federal, state, and local funds, the majority of which is federal. And of the funds that we received, we used $225.4 million. And there you can see on the second pie chart how it looks based upon state-defined categories of spending for schools. So the greatest, obviously, is instructing our students. The 22% that you see there, support services, that includes transporting our students to and from school every day, as well as providing clean, safe, and functional facilities for our students, as well as providing health services to our students, and administration is included in there as well. So our total operating fund surplus at the end of the year was almost $1.8 million, $1,788,091. Of that amount, we received cash, restricted cash, so there's an obligated portion of that operating surplus of $172,879 that we have a slide that will show you what makes up that balance. The residual is an unobligated operating surplus of $1,615,212. And it's important to note that that's just under 1% of our total operating budget.
Could you go back one, Ms. Anderson,
Sure.
please? So just for constituents that are watching, school operating fund. So there's been a lot of talk of the school not being having a fiduciary responsibility when it comes to our funds. So here we have a surplus, which is just under 0.69% of the operating budget. Reason why that's important, there's been a lot of talk about zero-based budgeting. If we were to dry up these funds, if we were to spend these funds to zero every year, which would be a miracle because electric bills change, some positions that we want to fill, we cannot fill, so there will always be a little more in there for various reasons. that we then wind up turning back to the Board of Supervisors. So why am I talking about this? If we were to go and ask for more money than what is appropriated, that is illegal. There are two things I do not look good in: horizontal stripes and the color orange. I do not want to go to jail because we spent more money than we were appropriated. So we will always finish every year with a slight surplus because that keeps us out of trouble. It also allows for certain things. For example, Mr. Davis might have instead of the $300,000 that he obligated for an HVAC replacement, the cost of that replacement may go up because the economy drives that. It may go to $350,000. We have that fluidness in our budget to accommodate Mr. Davis's request for that new HVAC system. So it gives us comfort level, not only legally, but for things that may come in over bid, over what we would like it to be, bid-wise.
I'd like to offer a different perspective
Yes,
of
please.
that $1.6 million. So if you have a household that has income of $50,000 for a year, that would be $345 left over at the end of the year.
That's much better than what I just said. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
So on this slide, we're showing you the variables that made up the $1.6 million surplus. We had budgetary savings in our non-grant related payroll expenditures, and we had budgetary savings in all of our schools and departments. We have over 45 different account managers, so that's between our schools and our departments. So when you see $976,000 left over, it's across 45 different account managers. So I want to get back to the conversation of the obligated portion of the remaining funds, $172,878.70. Here's where we're going to seek a motion for a budget adjustment to carry forward these funds to this school year. So as you can see, this is a list of various grants that we received, and this is cash on our books that we were not able to spend by June 30th. One of the reasons why is because sometimes this cash doesn't come in until the last week of June. So we don't have time to spend it in its intended purpose in a meaningful way.
But yet, according to Virginia State Code, we still have to ask for it because it will be in this next fiscal year.
That is correct. We need to get it reappropriated to be able to spend it.
Got it.
Okay.
Even though the intent, just for folks watching,
Yeah.
even though the intent, for example, the school safety and security grant, the intent was to spend that within 2024.
Correct.
But because it didn't come in until, a few weeks before the end of the fiscal year, we have to go through the administrative process of having it reappropriated for 2025.
That's correct?
Okay.
Or she wears orange.
Or I wear orange.
Yes.
Yes.
Most of these funds were provided by the state. We did have a couple of local funds. One that I think is really cool is the First Bank donation, which pays two of our high school students to tutor elementary schools. That was provided to us through a charitable trust.
Fantastic.
That's great.
Yeah. So here's where we're seeking a motion.
So, Madam Chair, I move the committee forward to the full Board of Budget adjustment to the school operating fund for $172,878.70, which represents the obligated funds received during fiscal year 2024 and requested for carry forward into fiscal year 2025.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All right, seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying, yes, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And finally, I get to talk, and I stepped away from that table because I thought Shane and the rest of them would not let me talk. That way, the mic is here and I can continue. So also, I want to draw your
Shane.
attention to these obligated funds. You'll look at the bottom of this slide. We will be taking your request. If the full board approves this on September 24th, we will be taking this recommendation downtown to get approval as well.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about the other piece. We've already talked about our restricted or obligated. Here, now we're going to talk about our unobligated. So we have $1.6 million that were remaining, meaning there's no encumbrance against that money. There's no reason to use that money because what we've we couldn't spend it by the end of the year. And as-
0.69%, right?
0.69%.
That's the 0.69%. I just want
Yes.
to drive that home.
Please. I'll keep saying that too. We'll just keep that going. So anyway, so what we're asking you to do is also to move this to the full board, to take those funds and put it in our capital projects fund. If you remember last year, that list was about 19 million. The downtown gave us 3 million. We still have a very long list of things to address. So on this list, Mr. Davis, our facilities director, who's behind me and who will come up here in just a minute and talk about these, he went and reprioritized what was there because things happen in a year. Something moves up, something moves down, something becomes more important. So the top 4 you see there are his top 4 priorities that he would like to address in the Capital Projects Fund. When you add those up, they're $170 short of the 1.6, so I'm not a bad mathematician. It is on purpose. So then what happens too when we go out, Mr. Davis has done his best to do an estimate. But until we get competition and going out, that's when we start seeing some savings. So he could find some savings in those 4 projects. And if he does, we want to move that to a 5th project, which is the Orchard View. That's why you see alternate 1, because we have 170 left. If he finds some more savings, we may be able to get enough to do number 5 as well. So that's why you see that a little differently. But if we don't have enough money, it won't get done. Any excess money stays in this fund to help, because sometimes the pricing can come up or down. So cash stays in. It's always best to have a little there as a buffer in case some of these projects come in higher than what we anticipated. So at this point, I'm going to stop and ask Mr. Davis to come up and talk to you all about these 5 projects that he'd like to see funded for next year, okay? Mr. Erskine, you look confused, and I want to make sure I
Not
didn't
even
go
a
too
little.
fast.
Nope, I was happy that you said he's going to come up and tell us a little bit more about the project, so.
Good.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I was only up here 5 minutes. Mr. Davis, I guess you're wanted up here, so. Mr. Davis?
Good evening, Madam Chair, committee members, Dr. Hummer. So let's talk about why these are important. I can start up top and talk about Sharando. The boiler there, we have 2 boilers there. We did approve one for replacement this year. This is the second one. They operate in tandem where one works, the other one sits idle, the other one that's idle becomes working, they fluctuate back and forth. So they work together. So I'd like to see the second one, that way we're done with that school. Bass Hoover boiler and water heater. The water heat or the boiler that we're going to replace at Bass Hoover is from 1975. It is an electric boiler and it is not operating right now. So we're working on one boiler there from 1991 is the boiler that's operating that school right now. I feel that one's pretty good. Sharando track, Ms. Klein, you wore that track out.
I did. A lot of laps.
So we'd like to, right now it is a rubberized track. The rubberized coating on top is coming off.
Oh, yeah.
You probably shaking your head familiar with it. It's not a pothole, but it is dangerous to a runner out there. So we'd like to replace that. Millbrook High School tennis courts, we have cracks that are about 1 inch to 1.5 inches there. It's faded out pretty bad, so we'd like to do that as well. Sharando track and tennis court are obviously safety issues right there too, so we'd like to take care of those for our kids. Top 2 are heating and cooling. Trust me, this week's been interesting, so I'd like to take care of those as well.
Yeah.
The last one, the Orchard View windows and doors. We are doing doors there now, so that $250 will come down a little bit, but we may have some savings in the top 4, as Patty mentioned. So open to you guys for questions.
So, Mr. Davis, just to clarify, these projects, if they don't get funded by the 0.69% of our budget, they would be on the docket for next year.
Correct.
So these are essentially just the next in line.
Correct.
In priority order that you
Yes.
need. Okay.
That's absolutely right.
And also to the estimates, these are estimates. The 375 for Sharando is an estimate. And that's what the RFP, we would put out an RFP. And then you would take all of the bids. And am I correct in saying it's FCS's best practice to take the lowest bidder?
That is our practice.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The high school track and tennis court, we did get bids on that earlier, so those are closer numbers, but these are all estimates.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just a couple clarifying questions. The tennis court, you said that's got cracks. Is this like just normal wear and tear, or is it a construction deficiency? Like what happened there?
A little bit of both. It's age, the base wears out over time. It's normal wear and tear.
I mean, it's hitting its 20-year anniversary, so.
It is,
Yeah.
and it's basically asphalt is what it is. It's an asphalt parking lot, but it's a tennis court lined as one, so.
Okay.
They wear out, they stretch, they heat, expand, and becomes wear and tear, so.
And then the other question, so the windows and door replacements at Orchard View, are those energy related? Or, I mean, or
They would
is
be,
it, or is it
yes.
security?
Well, both, really.
Okay.
It would be energy, obviously, for the windows. The doors are a safety issue, and windows can be security. Would work with Tim Conlon over in security on windows, so it's a little bit of both.
Can I add two things, Madam Chair? Is that okay? So the first one is, thank you, Dr. Erskine, for that last question. So the doors need to be replaced for safety reasons, and I've had some of their staff reach out to me in regards to the issue, but essentially, mind my little drawing on my hand here, but there's a piece of metal that's on the door, and people walk by it and inadvertently hit the flap, and when the door closes, the door stays open. So I don't know why, and I know we've talked about this, of why you would install a door like that into a school, but that's before all of us, so we're just going to move forward and fix that. But I did have some teachers that were literally right next to that door, and it's a safety violation, and that's the last thing that we want to see is put our staff and our students at risk. So that is something that we're going in there and fixing, and I've worked with Mr. Conlon and the sheriff's office, and they all agree that we need to replace those doors. So that's a good thing. The second piece is I want to take this opportunity to provide Mr. Davis with a lot of accolades, and this isn't just coming from me. This is coming from all of our principals, and not just a handful. In the amount of work that he has accomplished in the short time that he has been here, and the amount of work that he has done to be more transparent with these projects and to be more transparent with the work that we're doing. And he is just a breath of fresh air with all of the work orders that he's gotten done. He's putting together a fantastic team. And his number one is lined up with my number one in regards to we are about customer service and doing what's best for kids. And he has aligned with that, and we are just very thankful for he's here. And I just need you to know that, because the work that he's doing is not necessarily good for kids, but it's saving us a lot of money, because he is able to drill these numbers down and actually push back on some of these projects that might have been on the list that might be some other things that we need to do, like you're talking about with structural type things. So Mr. Davis is asking the right questions, and he's putting all of these things in place, which brings me to my next piece is at our next Buildings and Grounds meeting, we are going to be putting together a breakdown of our CIP projects to see where we are with those priorities. As we've mentioned, these items are on there, but he's going to be putting that together so that we can get a better idea of where we are with these projects. But this is all to Mr. Davis's leadership, and he is doing a phenomenal job. So I just wanted to take that opportunity. So thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Dr. Hummer. I don't have anything to say after that.
Just keep it up.
I don't want to harsh your mellow. I just want to ask a clarifying question about the security issue. Since we know now that door replacement is a safety issue, would it be prudent perhaps to have that higher on the list?
So Orchard View already has doors ordered, and they are being replaced as soon as they come in.
Okay.
It's actually Orchard View and Apple Pie are getting new doors.
And if I could also add too, we had a back order issue with those
Yeah.
doors. That's one of the things we've had to deal
Yeah.
with. Was still some of the supply chain issues, but
Great.
they have been a priority. Yes.
Yeah, it's more of a window project there, and whatever door is left over. That's why we think we can save the 250 will come down, and there is some savings in the top four, we're hoping, so.
Good.
Yeah,
And those funds would have come out of what we had left over. Had they come in, had those doors arrived yesterday and you were able to put them in, they would have been paid for out of a fund that funds were already appropriated.
correct.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I want to bring something up just to make sure that it's clear to the public, given the volume of one of our constituents' words at our last board meeting. My son goes to Sharando High School, and he's a track runner, so I have a horse in that race, pun intended. So I don't know if that is a conflict of interest, since my son is a part of that because I would be voting to raise $350,000 to fix the track. So I don't know who I ask. Oh, maybe our lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm going to say probably it's the best interest to do that, Mrs. Jordan.
Thank you. I certainly don't want to wind up on the front page of the Winchester Star.
Even tonight, Mr. Bell, if you want, just to be on the safe side, Ms. Jordan and Dr. Hummer, if we could, just to be on the safe side of that, could you go ahead and abstain tonight, Daryl? And then,
What's it worth to? No, of course.
okay. Okay.
Because you still have a majority if you and Dr. Erskine
Correct.
approve, yeah. And
Is
we
that
can
a-
look into that.
Is that copacetic with Robert's rules and every code? Okay.
Should I do that? Thank you. Sorry.
I also wanted to just add a clarifying point. I misspoke 2 slides back regarding this 1,615,212 and the 0.69%. I said that it goes back to the Board of Supervisors, and if they chose not to reallocate it to us, I put the contingency fund. It actually goes to their capital projects fund. So if they choose not to reappropriate it to us, it goes to their capital projects fund where they would have the discretion to spend it on whatever they wanted. So just a clarifying point.
You guys have any other questions? Great. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, so we have a
So, really quick, before you all motion this, I want to make sure that we go over the next slide in regards to the savings piece, in case, I want to make sure that we're full disclosure on this, because this was that new code that went into effect in regards to what to do with these cost savings dollars, and I want Mrs. Camry to talk through this, and I can answer any questions as well, because if you all move forward with the 1.6, there won't be any money to potentially put in this fund if this is what you want it to do, if that makes sense.
Okay, got it.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So Mrs. Camry.
Yeah, so this was approved through the General Assembly. So now, in concurrence, you all as a school board, as well as the Board of Supervisors, can agree to say that any remaining funds we have at the end of the year can automatically go into a capital reserve fund, meaning that it is similar to a savings account, meaning that every year that money stays in there, and you can allocate it. Before you put it in there, you have to say, what's the purpose of the money? Is it for the 4th high school? Is it for Middletown expansion? Whatever that is, you have to state it up front, put it in this reserve, and it carries over until you spend it for that project. For us to do this now would mean we would have to set up a separate fund called a capital reserve fund. You all would have to do a resolution as well as downtown to agree to say that any remaining funds we have at the end of every year would automatically go into that fund, or some portion of that. So I think that's why Dr. Hummer wanted you to be aware, because the 1.6 that we just talked about would be the type of funds that you would put into an account like this.
And we don't currently have a timeline as to when 22.1-100 Bravo will be implemented, or is it implemented
It's implemented
full up
now.
right now? Okay. So could we, in theory, ask the Board of Supervisors to approve this new unexpended school and education funds capital reserve fund ahead of asking them for the 1.6 or the 1.6 million reallocation?
So that is why I wanted to wait before
Yeah.
you guys approve the first one, because you could. I think what Mrs. Camry is saying was, what I'll recommend is, we don't know what this is going to look like.
I see.
So
Okay.
we could say, let's take, recommendation, we go back to the previous slide, if we could say, whoa boy, other way. There we go. One more. So what we could say is, we'll move forward 1.3 million, and we take off tennis court resurface, and we just put 320 in there. I'm just using that as an example. The other piece is, based on what that code and how it's written, of course, we are going to need permission from the locality, but it's also going to have to be specific to a project. We can't just say, we'll have these dollars in here and spend them as we see fit.
Right.
So we would have to say, we're going to utilize this towards the 4th high school. The other piece with that, just a thought for you all to take into consideration, we haven't received approval for the 4th high school. So if we put money in this account and the Board of Supervisors does not approve that, then we've just now moved money we could have used for this tennis court into this fund that's now just going to sit there for a year. So I want to make sure that you guys were fully informed on this. Whatever you decide to do is the will of the board. Our recommendation is that we move forward with these projects. We continue to look into that. And one of the things that we could do is for future budgets, if we know we're going to get the fourth high school, we could just talk about putting money into that fund at the end of every year and saying, so if we get approval, we'll say we're going to take that 1.6 and put it in this fund to spend on the fourth high school. So now that we can chisel down that cost. So that would be something we could talk about and look into. The other piece that we have to remember is regardless if the fourth high school gets paid for or not, these projects are going to compound. And these projects, like the boiler is not going to fix itself if we get a fourth high school. The tennis court's not going to resurface itself. These are things, that's why it's two different buckets of money, the CIP and the CAP.
Yep.
So I think that's another piece as well. I just want to make sure you guys are fully informed of all those items because of that optics as well as the items that we need to be approved. So.
Yeah, to me, it seems like there's too many unknowns with that fund right now. I cannot wait for it, though, once it becomes more known and we have more information. Because one of the things I hear a lot from constituents is, well, if you guys want all of these things, save your money and then get them. Well, right now, it's illegal for us to save money, period, according to Virginia State Code. That is above our head. We can't change that. That's not us. That's not the county. That is above our head. So it's something we have to abide by. For those who don't like that, I don't care for that. We have state delegates and representatives and state senators that you can email and let them know your thoughts on that. But for the meantime, until we get this new fund fully baked, if you will, I agree with Dr. Hummer. I think it would be most prudent for us to go ahead and move forward with these projects so that we can get going. Mr. Davis can get going on this.
Now, I can still make a motion and second it because I'm not voting, correct?
I don't think so.
I have to be quiet?
You got to be quiet. I know, it's going to be hard. So.
Madam
you'll have-
Chair.
Yes.
I move that the committee forward to the full board a budget adjustment to the capital project funds in the amount of $1,615,212, which represents the fiscal year 2024 remaining unobligated funds from the school operating fund to be used to purchase one boiler for Sharando High School, boiler and water heater at Bass Hoover Elementary, track resurface at Sharando High School, and tennis court resurface at Millbrook High School, and that any funds remaining after these projects are completed will be used to fund the alternate project of windows and doors at Orchard View Elementary School.
Second. All right, we have a motion on the floor. It's been properly seconded. Any discussion? All right, seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 2-0.
Thank you. And I'll just want to draw your attention to the fact that if the full board approves this on September 24th, this would also go downtown to be put on their agenda.
Thank you.
So now we want to talk a little bit about opioid funds, and I can tell you that is a tongue twister for me. I do not know why. But anyway, these are some funds received by Frederick County government from a settlement from different companies who actually put out opioid and the abuse of that. Dr. Hummer and I met with Mr. Bohofer yesterday to get more information about these funds so that we kind of knew where to guide you all and what to do with this. We originally had this as asking you for a motion to do a supplemental appropriation, but after our meeting with Mr. Bohofer, it is obvious we probably need to slow the train down a little bit. He is sharing information with us as he gets it as well, so it's kind of a little too early to do that. So we just wanted to bring it to your attention in case you hear about it. We have the ability to get somewhere around 1.3 or 1.5. However, this money is going to be received in bits and pieces until 2039. So it will take a while for that fund to build up. We were looking to use those funds at Dow G. Howard in some way, shape, or form. And Mr. Thompson is here, but these are the types of things he would like to use those funds to address. However, we're not really ready to move forward because we still need some more information from downtown. So we just wanted to kind of put it on your radar. Dr. Hummer, did you want to add anything to that?
No, these were just dollars that they had. They wanted to provide us access to, and Mr. Thompson was working with some of our staff, and, he always has some amazing and phenomenal ideas, so this was just a way for having some of those ideas come to fruition. So we're going to continue to provide you information and feedback, and then we'll let you know when we're ready to move forward with it.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Can I just ask Ms. Camry a question? So just because from reading the settlement, when the class action was all settled, I remember that the intent of these funds was at least partially to be for opioid awareness and education. And I'm just wondering, and you don't have to answer now, but if we've considered using some of those funds, I don't want to take away from Mr. Thompson's program. I don't want him to be upset. Oh, there he is. For Dow J. I just wonder about things like Narcan and Narcan training for our school, for our different schools, and wonder whether that might also be considered.
So we actually already have that.
Fantastic.
So all of our nurses have Narcan, and Mrs. Unhock is training our staff to make sure that they have those pieces. One of the pieces when we receive these dollars, and Mrs. Camry can definitely chime in, is always a double-edged sword, right? Because we like to get this monies to pay for certain things, but when we get these one-time monies, we want to make sure that we are buying things that could be a one-time use. And then, because if not, we're going to have to sustain that in future budget cycles. And we definitely don't want to commit either you all or future boards to items that potentially can harm our future budget cycles. So that's why we're trying to find one-time uses, but we get that Narcan from the state and we don't have any issues there. Yeah, great question. We've talked about that, but this would be ways, and again, these were just items to consider. We might come up with other ideas or items. These are just some initial conversations that we've had.
And Dr.
Yeah,
Hummer,
great question.
Dr. Hummer, if I
Yeah.
may, as a part of the Student Support Services team, we have also considered some of those options, Dr. Erskine, to include signage, posters, bulletin boards for our schools. So we've done the inventory and pricing for that information to include even possible presentations for drug prevention and awareness. So, yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, absolutely.
And then lastly, here, we want to talk about a partnership that does already exist now that started this year. So there was a lab school partnership that George Mason is doing in connection with us. Also, George Mason is the fiscal agent for these funds. This is a 5-year term for this partnership. However, we're not guaranteed the full 5 years of funding. So what we're bringing to you tonight is what we do know, which is the first year of the funding. So there's a chance that we could have close to $2.3 million if the 5 years always funded. But the first year is $798,809 that we're asking for tonight. Dow J. Howard would still be the recipient of those funds, and we are looking for your motion to move it to the full board, but I'm going to ask Mr. Thompson to come up so we can talk about this more in detail. Okay? And if you use the word amazing with him as you did with Mr. Davis and you didn't use it with me, I mean, I'm going to be a little upset.
Ms. Camry is amazing. I will tell you. So the partnership that we've developed with George Mason, we've had extensive conversations with our construction folks, our planning folks, Mr. Kenny, Mr. Lee, finance folks, and several folks at George Mason University, and really looking at an opportunity here where we can add a data science program for Dow J. Howard and for the students, ultimately the students of Frederick County. And so a lot of great opportunities here. We're looking at, originally the grant was much higher than it was cut back. So we're looking at about 60 students here and some much needed renovation to our HVAC system at Dow J. Howard, which will be extremely helpful. I think I've mentioned this here at this podium before, but none of our lab spaces, like our auto body, carpentry, none of those spaces have air conditioning and haven't since the school has been open. And so this would provide an opportunity because we'd be moving them out of their classrooms into their labs to have class as well. And so that is the nexus of an impact, and so that we're able to HVAC those spaces now. So great opportunity here to get some good renovations. There was some work done at Dow J. Howard, and also offer some more opportunities for kids that's really needed. So,
Great.
Madam Chair, if I can add one piece of clarity, thank you, Mr. Thompson, is just to be clear, these dollars are funneled from the state, and George Mason is the fiscal agent, and these lab schools are in partnership with local school divisions and universities. So this isn't George Mason giving us this money, it's the money that the state gave to this lab school, and it's being funneled to us to take care of whatever we need. So just want to be clear on that piece.
Hence the need for the need for an appropriation, because it is state funds, even though George Mason is the fiscal agent, which essentially means they do all the bookkeeping for it,
Yes, ma'am.
essentially.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, I move the committee forward to the full board a request for budget adjustment to the Special Grants Fund in the amount of $798,809. That represents year one funds allocated to Frederick County Public Schools from the George Mason University and Frederick County Public Schools Lab School Partnership.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. It's been properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, Madam Chair, that is all of our items, and you have moved all the items to the full board for approval that we have discussed. And if you have any other questions, my team and I are available to answer them.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I move to adjourn the Finance Committee meeting post haste.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn on the floor. It has been properly seconded. Any discussion? Actually, I have one small discussion point, a little bit of a myth buster before we go. So, true or false, our enrollment projections at the end of last school year was 14,459. Anybody have any idea what we're up to now, as of today?
1,000.
14,800. That's an overage of 341 students. That is beyond what any other entity, third party projected us to be at. It's beyond what we projected us to be at. And how many days are we into the school year?
10.
10. Not that you're counting or anything. So just an interesting fact I'd like to leave us all with. So back to the motion on the floor that's been properly seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.